Where have you been?
I've been enjoying the world around me, but am confused at how I got here or how it got here at all.
Okay. Questions?
I was curious about children's development. So, my understanding is that an infant, before they reach the ages of maybe 6 or 8 months, doesn't have self object differentiation, meaning they don't conceive of themselves as a separate self apart from the world. And if they conceive of a self at all, it is the everything they see, touch, taste, feel. Is that a common understanding in child psych?
And it's directly related to your question about the world around you. Uh, it should be, but I'm not sure how many people actually think about early childhood development, the earliest childhood development. But it's a commonplace among developmental psychologists, I presume, I hope, and certainly among psychoanalytic uh, psychiatrists at this point, the notion that the child is an undifferentiated consciousness in the beginning and doesn't have a separate ego, and treats the mother and the breast as an extension of himself. I mean, why would the child? Why would she think about herself as distinct? There's no reason for her to do that until there's problems with the breast or with the world, or the world doesn't respond the way she likes or whatever. And so gradually it dawns upon the child that, hey, wait a minute, this thing here that's soothing and warm and comforting is not a part of me. It's a separate entity. And the theorists in this regard, the one that first comes to mind is brilliant, wonderful Melanie Klein, one of my favorite psychoanalytic thinkers, and she's acknowledged as the mother of object relations. But I think Anna Freud, the daughter of Freud, may have also postulated the same thing, and even Freud himself may have. I don't know. It's kind of cool because it's their equivalent in the 20th century, the 19th and 20th century, of us and basal cognition, where we're realizing that even if with our models of mind, we need to have more basic building blocks. And so now that we've learned that slime molds can learn mazes, and that fungi have brains, and that bacteria can think, we're starting, or tissues can think. This basic building block of cognition is now becoming a part of the way we think about not just machine learning, but mentation in general. Now, going back to the psyche and the last century, yeah, I think among people, it's like in any field, there are people who just learn the minimum they need to know to pass the exam, and people who really want to understand. And I think among the latter, it is a common knowledge that ego differentiation is a process. It's not you're not born with it. It's acquired. So I suppose that, I don't know, if people don't know that, welcome to the news, and you really need to incorporate that into your worldview and into your view of yourself. You didn't always have this self. You didn't always differentiate yourself from the world. Good question. Does that help? Does that answer it?
That does help. So, my question is then that acknowledges that separateness is not fundamental. Like, we have an understanding, at least for the serious child development researchers, that separateness is a learned quality, like numerosity is learned. Being able to count things and know that whatever you
Well,
count adds up to how many
there's some
supposed
basic
things there are.
numerosity that apparently or is either learned or it's innate, and it occurs very early. That was a striking finding of Philippe Rochard, I don't know how you pronounce it. It's in French, Rochat, uh, and others, early developmental psychologists. So what they do is they put when we got the technology. When I was in school, what I did was videotaped a child right as he was born, the day after he was born, and actually it was my son. And what we did was we measured the eye movements to see if kids dreamed. Later, we developed technology where you can actually track the eye movements of an awake child and see what they're attending to. And using this paradigm, they can tell what the child is, what's novel to the child, because they look at novelty more, or what doesn't fit for the child. And so they put up a screen like this, and then they'd have, say, one stick go this way, like this. And that's fine. The kid, that makes sense for the kid. But if you go like this and nothing comes out, they wonder what happened. It's like peekaboo, that game where the child's learning constancy of objects. But then if you put two objects like this, let's imagine they're lined up though. You have two objects like this, and they go back here. That's fine. That's fine. But if this happens, oops, I'm not much of a magician. If this happens, only one comes out, the two went behind. The child goes, what the hell is that about? And so that basic numerosity exists very, very early. And then we have to also think about animal cognition, and they're able to do certain cognitive tasks. And as far as I know, in addition to object constancy, there's certain inborn fears. For example, cats and heights, and maybe certain primates and snakes. So I haven't reviewed the field in a while. It's been 20 years, but that's where I left it. And so there's many things, the features of cognition that are important to try and understand it, but the differentiation of self and object is something that's to some extent acquired.
That's helpful.
We could do that. A thought just occurred to me, an experiment we could do. We know that children listen to music in the womb. They listen to voices in the womb. But for the child, that probably just feels like a voice in their head, right? Hush, little baby, don't you cry. And the kid in the womb is hearing the mother's voice. And we know this because the kid can recognize the mother's voice as opposed to the father's voice at birth. They'll turn to the side of the mother's voice. But for them, they probably hear this and they just think it's some kind of, they don't think that way. They just have this song that appears in their young brain. And these kinds of thought experiments are very good for people to do, for thinking people to do, to learn about themselves a little bit more. How much of your world comes from what you've learned from your parents and your culture.
Yeah, that's an interesting experiment I would want to play with.
For example, geography, we assume that geography is going to be divided up into maps that are flat territories. But my understanding of some Aboriginal cultures is they don't see geography that way. They see it as lines, song lines or something like that. I don't know enough to talk about it with authority, but these are the kind of extraordinary questions that we really need to answer about ourselves. So their territories have more to do with songs and completing songs, and it's not so much a bounded landmass. And I think Native Americans in this country may not have thought of it so much as a bounded landmass with an artificial line drawn by an engineer, right? as something else. And these are arbitrary ways of looking at the world. I'm sure there's better examples than I'm coming up with. There must be better examples. But it's a great subject. And one that we need to know a lot more about, because now that we're hooking kids up to VR very young, or we will be, a lot of kids, their iPad is their best friend when they're at home. And mom's busy working or fixing dinner or dad or whatever. They spend a lot of time with their iPads. And there's no reason to think that trend is going to go away. If anything, there's a trend for the state to raise the child even more. So if that's the way we're going to head, it would be good to know something about what we're doing to these kids' brains. Right? I can imagine a scenario where a child learns an entire world, the topology of the world, and then he's surprised when he grows up and goes outside and finds out the world is not like that. In VR. And then the other interesting thing is that I don't think it's just me, but I think the animals are becoming more conscious and more intelligent. And a lot of things that I learned about animals is wrong. Like crocodiles aren't maternal. Wrong. I learned that one direct firsthand. And then I saw this great, it's so cute, this some donkey wandered away from his donkey pack, you know, that the guy was guy had a string of donkeys. He lost one. But this young donkey then wandered off and then was raised by elks. And then they had a picture of him in the wild, and he's walking around like he's an elk. I mean, as far as he's concerned, he is an elk. He doesn't have a mirror, right? He's an elk with a funny voice, I guess, but it's pretty charming to see that. That's a huge topic. I used to have a lot more expertise, and it's a kind of field that should be moving quickly, so it'd probably be good to review the latest research. Although who knows, like so many other things, it may have been neglected in the rush to get more. I mean, there's not much profit per se in it, and it's not clinically obviously important, although I think it is for studying things like autism and things like that. But it may have been neglected, and so that would be a great field for people to go into. Early child development. Okay? And by the way, I might as well recommend the book. It's called The Infant's World of Philippe Rochat, Rochat. Yeah, he's a great developmental psychologist. Very, very nice review in that book. I wrote a review of it, but I don't know where it is. It's buried somewhere on the internet, probably.
I have a different line of questions about during an exchange between the national teacher.
May I just, before we go to that, let me say a few things about object constancy and object relations that the public may not know, and they really should know. In psychoanalytic theory, just the way things happen to develop, a person is also called an object, and a child has a relationship with their objects. And of course, the most important object for a child is the mother, or the maternal figure, presumptively. Now, there are certain kinds of character pathology, in particular borderline character pathology, that's thought to result from unstable or unreliable relationships with that object at about 18 months. And so the idea that, and there's fairly good evidence for it, and borderline personality is a very devastating condition. It's a character structure. And the person is constantly unable to feel secure enough in the object. They don't know if it's going to leave them or not, and so they learn all kinds of pathological ways to relate to the object. Forgive the terminology, it's not mine. And so what we see then, if there's a disruption in this normal process of ego differentiation, the differentiation of the individual self, and there's pathological fusing or pathological disruption, then you have long-term effects. And the reason why child development is so important is because if you screw this up early, you can screw the person up for life, right? That's how the theory goes, and I have no reason to doubt it. And so it's called object relations, and Melanie Klein, Anna Freud, there's a number of others, not Heinz Hartmann particularly, somebody else, Kohut, Otto Kernberg, these theoreticians we used to listen to them. They used to have some input on what we do with regard to children. I saw an article recently in a leading newspaper saying that taking care of old people or children is interfering with people's career development, which to me seems like to have everything backwards. But that's the world we live in. But obviously that's not sustainable for long. The culture will collapse. And so whether we're doing that consciously and deliberately, I hope not, or we're doing it out of just sheer ignorance and greed, and it doesn't matter, we're going to have a generation that's going to be impaired if we're not careful. All right, thank you. My little plug for sanity. Okay. But again, I would encourage anybody that's looking for something constructive to do to look into this field. It's neglected. It shouldn't be.
So we have a series of answers here from a national teacher of Qingliang during the Chinese Song Dynasty.
Yes.
Who's
Okay,
answering.
Okay, go ahead.
Apparently, the imperial crown prince of Qingliang asked the national teacher during the Chinese Song Dynasty about the essentials of mind.
Correct.
And this national teacher has a 35-part response about the essentials.
Well, no. I did that for students. It's actually just one discourse. And I'm wondering if I should read at least part of it. But let me say a few words about this book. I'm not necessarily recommending this book for anybody except for true Zenists, right? People who are very serious about Zen, or who have mastered enough, or for people who have woken up, because otherwise it's basically unintelligible. However, within it, there's many discourses. And without understanding the context of China at that time, it was a prosperous time, an exciting time. There were many new developments, new inventions, new trade routes and industries. And I happened to hear this in Audible. There's a great Audible version, and it was just so beautiful. I had to share it. Now, it's can you imagine? It's the reply of the national teacher of Zen, so that already tells you something. There's a national teacher, so that's neither here nor there at the moment. But he's the imperial crown prince was inquiring about the essentials of mind from a Zen master. Can you imagine? Our equivalent of princes, the sons of the presidents or Prince Charles or whatever, asking a Zen master to explain the essentials of mind. But so this is how he responded, and it's just so beautiful and so concise and so it's quite comprehensive and just absolutely gorgeous. So let me read just a little bit and see how that goes. And then we could take questions on it. The reply of the national teacher of Qingliang to the imperial crown prince's inquiry about the essentials of mind. The ultimate way is rooted in the mind. The reality of mind is rooted in nondwelling. The awareness of the nondwelling substance of mind is not obscured. Essence and characteristics peaceful. It contains qualities and functions. Comprehending both inside and outside, it is deep and it is broad. Neither existent nor void, it is not produced and does not pass away. It has no end and no beginning. When you seek it, you cannot get it, reject it, and it still doesn't leave. If you miss the immediate experience, then pains of confusion are jumbled. If you realize true essence, then the light of openness is thoroughly clear. Although mind itself is Buddha, only those who experience it actually know. But if there is realization and knowledge, then the sun of wisdom sets in the land of existence. Yet if there is no illumination and no awakening, then dark clouds cover the gate of emptiness. If a thought is not produced, then before and after are cut off, and the luminous essence stands alone. Others and self are one suchness. Go directly to the source of mind, and there is no knowledge, no attainment. You neither grasp nor reject, so there is no opposition and no cultivation. Nonetheless, confusion and enlightenment are interdependent. Truth and illusion are relative. If you seek reality trying to get rid of illusion, that is like trying to wear out your body to get rid of your shadow. If you realize how illusion is truth, that is like staying in the shade so your shadow disappears. We'll stop there. That's about halfway. But just that right there. If you realize how illusion is truth, that is like staying in the shade so your shadow disappears. Just these kinds of metaphors that sound very, very oblique or obtuse and difficult to the person that hasn't studied these things, but in fact are just gorgeously beautiful and accurate and precise. So now you have questions. Can we take them in order of the text? I think that would be helpful for people.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
good.
please.
Maybe we should read up to each one where the question is, and you could read it because it's not going to hurt people to hear these. They're just beautifully concise.
Agreed. The ultimate way is rooted in the mind. The reality of mind is rooted in non-dwelling. Two questions about that. The first is, mind can be used in many different ways to refer to many different things. How is it being used here?
This is an excellent question and a very good point. We, some of us today, we make a distinction between consciousness and mind, between foundational awareness and mind, between consciousness with a capital C and mind. And mind we use to describe the objects or the processes of mind, or the sentences that go through your head. In other words, mind is, we use big M mind in some manners of speaking. Mind with a big M is capital C consciousness or capital A awareness. But mind with a small m is the contents of consciousness or awareness. So the sentence, Mary had a little lamb, may be an object in consciousness or in awareness with capital letters, but it wouldn't be an object in consciousness, say, if you were from the Fiji Islands necessarily. I've got battery problems here. It wouldn't be an object of consciousness if you were from I don't know, Africa. So, but awareness, the basic consciousness would be the same. Do you see what I'm saying? So consciousness and awareness speak to the fundamental. Now, in the 10th century, they didn't make such a distinction. In this particular Zen master, at this particular time, speaking to this particular prince, and this particular monastery or whatever they had, some big institution, uses mind in a different way. He uses it to mean both. Right? So it's very important to clarify. Just like in science, it's really important that we really nail people down and say, well, what do you mean when you're talking about consciousness? Are you talking about the product of mind or the objects in mind? Or are you talking about the foundational awareness, the quality? So here, they're using mind differently. So good. Is that it? Is that clear? It's important.
Yes. So mind is...
Just use mind like a layperson.
Well, no, mind here is everything and nothing.
Well, we're going to get to that, but we're not there yet. What's the question about? You said there were two questions.
Yeah, so
The ultimate way is rooted in the mind. The reality of mind is rooted in non-dwelling.
yes. So instead of just saying mind is rooted in non-dwelling,
Mm-hmm.
this the national teacher here is saying the ultimate way is rooted in the mind, as if the ultimate way is something separate from mind and it's in mind.
It's rooted in mind. I don't think he says anything about it being separate or not. And the way, which I capitalized it, maybe I shouldn't have actually now that I think about it, refers to the means by which you can't get to, you can't get anywhere with the human without using the mind. That's all it means. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can't talk to the foot and get enlightened. You can't talk to the eyes or the ears. I mean, as a matter of just general speaking, and wake up, or help somebody wake
Mm-hmm.
up. Okay.
That makes sense. That's
So he's
clarifying.
gone down to base. He's gone down to what first principles, right? Like everybody talks about
So
this, the
yeah,
first principles thinking. Okay, good.
so the ultimate way is the way to enlightenment or the way of living.
Is that what he says? He's very precise here.
No, but I'm asking. The ultimate way is rooted in the mind.
Correct. That's all he said. That's all he means.
The reality of mind is rooted in non-dwelling.
Correct. And this
Instead of just
requires a
saying
little bit more experience because where is the mind?
everywhere.
Exactly.
If yeah.
And this is what basically that Michael Levine, or Levin, sorry, Michael Levin, Levin, brilliant biologist, is realizing that cognition we cannot localize necessarily to the brain, that tissues also have cognition. So without making any assumptions at all, we don't know where the mind is, but we do know that it's not fixed any place. If you look for your mind, it moves. You can't. It's not like you can find it, open up your skull and pull it out. It's not like it's fixed in place in space or time. As a matter of fact, it's definitely not fixed in space and time. By the way, if my phone goes off because of battery, that'll be the end of this. So be it. But there's not much I can do about it because I've got the microphone plugged into the power jack. Okay. Okay. Next question.
The reality of mind is rooted, well, first of all, reality of mind.
Very good. So he clarified. Yeah, he could have just said mind,
mind.
but the reality of mind is rooted in non-dwelling. Yeah. So the mind is hard enough to find. Imagine finding the reality of mind.
Yeah, so if the mind were everything, the reality of mind would be.
But this whole world is rooted in non-dwelling. I mean, we put it in space and time, but even in space and time, it's constantly moving through both, right? And presumptively, the universe is doing the same thing. And so even with our models, it doesn't stay in the same place, right? It's not fixed in
on,
space or time.
on to the next line.
Okay.
The awareness of the non-dwelling substance of mind is not obscured.
Go on.
Essence and characteristics peaceful. It contains qualities and functions.
Correct. All three of those points are gorgeous and precise. But what questions do you have?
First part makes sense.
It's not obscure. The only thing that obscures it would be the mind and confusion. Okay.
Essence and characteristics peaceful.
Yeah.
It contains qualities and functions. Contains qualities and functions makes sense. That would be everything manifest. There's qualities.
I wasn't
of all
thinking
this
so
you
much
could
of
say.
that. I wasn't thinking of that, but yeah, you could say that.
Well, okay, so Well, better to clarify the first part then. Essence and characteristics peaceful. This is the awareness of the non-dwelling substance of mind. Essence and characteristics peaceful. What are the characteristics of that? Because I would think
The
it doesn't
characteristics
have
are peace, love, joy, but you could subsume them all into peace, beauty, truth. And there you have to have the experience. But when you go back to your foundational self, what you're going to find there is peace. And you'll also find love if you're actually there. It's what we're made of. It's quite extraordinary. But when we go down a few lines, it's going to say that you know, it'll circle back to this.
Yeah, because I was going to say, as a human being, that makes a lot of sense. As experienced by the human being, yes.
Or observed
But
by the human being.
Without the human being, I don't know if there are characteristics as such.
True, you don't. So let's keep going.
Okay. I have a question about the next line. Comprehending both inside and outside, it is deep and it is broad. What is inside and what is outside? Why are these separated here?
Well, didn't you when I asked you where you'd been, you said you'd been inside your mind, but outside in the outside world? So you're the way. I mean, it's a common way to look at our minds is to say that there's an inside, there's an outside. It's common to say there's an outside world.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was being used in the same way. So inside would be.
Well, we'll find more about
I guess
inside and
inside.
outside later when we get to other things. So this thing needs to, like I said, it's he doesn't break it down into these individual lines. It's more like a beautiful poem or essay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
comprehending both inside and outside, it is deep and broad. Neither existent nor void, it is not produced and does not pass away. It has no end and no beginning. Does that help?
Yes, I was just wondering if he was using inside and outside the same way as I conventionally would. Inside the skull,
He
or
does.
this internal
He's speaking
phenomenon.
he's speaking to the ages. He's speaking to future Buddhas, using the language of past Buddhas, but he's also speaking to a crown prince and explaining the essentials of mind. So yeah, he's not assuming that the guy is necessarily too advanced. But go ahead.
That's helpful. When you seek it, you cannot get it. Reject it, and it still doesn't leave.
See how beautifully put
If
that
you,
is?
yeah,
And you
that
see
is
how
beautiful.
you've heard many times in Dharma about how you must eschew, you must avoid desire. You can't, if you desire too hard or you desire the wrong way, you're going to block learning. You're going to block understanding. You're going to block insight. Right?
Yeah, and this is a very bastardized teaching, non-seeking seeking,
Right.
because it is. Yeah, this one gets thrown around. I see a lot of Dharma would-be's on
Yeah.
YouTube,
Lazy
and
people
they
will
throw
use
this
any
out.
reason to be lazy. You can just
Yeah,
ignore that. I mean, if people aren't serious, you can just ignore them. They're fine. It's just like letting the sheep graze or whatever. It doesn't matter. Let them graze. But here, look how beautifully it's put. When you seek it, you cannot get it. Reject it, and it still doesn't leave. So once you see far enough, you can't regress. You're stuck now with the reality, the truth that we don't know what we are, or where we are, who we are, or where we're going, or where we come from. But imagine putting it into that short a sentence. When you seek it, you cannot get it. Reject it, and it still doesn't leave. The guy's fat. Okay. Or sick. I don't
if
know
you
which
miss
one.
the if you
I crack myself up. Okay.
I mean, he is all the words I would have used in the past for those kinds of things I would use for this. So if you miss the immediate experience, then the pains of confusion are jumbled. If you realize true essence, then the light of openness is thoroughly clear.
Yeah, now here's the one issue, and it comes in the seventh line. If you realize true essence, then the light of openness is thoroughly clear. But if you haven't realized true essence yet, then some of this is going to sound a little confusing. Right?
Yeah.
So that's all.
Yeah, agreed.
That's all. But that's true with any field. No, well, it's not quite as true, but let's keep going. Read number 8.
But if there is, quote, realization and, quote, knowledge, then the sun of wisdom sets in the land of existence.
Oh, you left out the next line, though, the one that follows.
Oh, I skipped. Sorry.
Yeah.
After
this
the
is
light
very
of
important
openness is
line,
thoroughly
too. This is
clear.
very important.
Although mind itself is Buddha, only those who experience it actually know.
Right. So there's levels of knowing, and then there's a tripwire. There's a line between here and there, this side and that side. And it's only if you've been on this side then you know. All of this makes perfect sense, completely clearly. So that's all that's saying. It's kind of warning the prince. But go ahead. Now let's get to the next line.
But if there is, quote, realization and, quote, knowledge, then the sun of wisdom sets in the land of existence.
That's a great line.
So having put realization and knowledge in quotes, well, let me say what I think this line is saying. If there is something you can call realization or knowledge, like let's say knowledge of all of the teachings and the Dharma and knowledge of the specific 35 lines he writes, and you hold to that separately, fixedly, as knowledge, as opposed to the actual realization or knowing itself, then the sun of wisdom sets in the land of existence, meaning that illumination, the actual true knowledge with a capital K is no longer there.
Well, it doesn't say it's no longer there. It says the sun of wisdom sets. It's really beautifully said. You've got most of it, but the sun of wisdom sets is saying that it is no longer there. It just means that the sun is set, because that's not a... But this, he'll explain this more as we go on.
Yet if there is no illumination and no awakening, then dark clouds cover the gate of emptiness.
Right. So the people who say, well, you don't need words, you don't need to study, there's no knowledge, there's no understanding, it's all obvious, it's the lazy sheep, let's call them. Well, the dark clouds have covered the gate of emptiness, so then they're going to get to emptiness.
Can you explain why it's phrased as gate of emptiness as opposed to cover emptiness itself?
Because the gate opens and closes.
Emptiness being
the gate opens and closes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a limit to how far you can go in analyzing to detail. But if there's no illumination and no awakening, then dark clouds cover the gate of emptiness. Until those clouds are gone, you're not going to open. That gate's not going to open. I shouldn't have said a gate opens and closes. The gate doesn't open, I should say. Because once it's opened, it's open. So I misspoke, not our Zen master, 10th century Zen master.
If a thought is not produced, then before and after are cut off, and the luminous essence stands alone. Others and self are one suchness.
Yeah, so if people want a description, or I should wait for a question. Or is there a question? Question. I'm going to lose my battery. So let me just make a comment right here. I can't think of a more succinct and just penetrating comment about the nature of awakening, both what leads to it and what the result is. Or, I mean, I can't, I'm not this guy, right? So I'm just passing it on for future Buddhas, right? If a thought is not produced, if you don't think, if you stop thinking, there's no thought, then before and after are cut off. There's no before and there's no after, right? Because before and after are thoughts. And if those are cut off, then the luminous essence, in other words, awareness itself, consciousness, God, truth, beauty, what we're talking about here, stands alone. There's nothing left, right? Without thought, you're in it. This luminous essence. And then others and self are one suchness. So there's no differentiated self. There you're back to primal awareness. He'll get into this more, and he'll use the metaphor of the reflection of it's. We have to just keep going because he's building this thing up, and it's. You'll see. But I'm worried we're going to run out of time.
Go directly to the source of mind, and there is no knowledge, no attainment. You neither grasp nor reject, so there is no opposition and no cultivation.
Yeah, just gorgeous. Go directly to the source of mind, and there is no knowledge, no attainment. You neither grasp nor reject, so there's no opposition and no cultivation. Who's going to be doing all these things? Objecting or grasping or having knowledge or having all these things. It has to be someone there. If there's no one there, then none of these things exist. In order for there to be knowledge for the human, there has to be someone to have the knowledge. For example, now I've just touched one little facet of many facets to this particular sentence, but let's move on and let that, we could just use that for a placeholder because he's going to develop these things further. All right? So this is when the Zenists speak about no knowledge, no attainment, no enlightenment, no taste, no ear, no tongue, no eye, all the Heart Sutra, Vajraparamita Sutra, all that. That's, this is part of that family, let's say. All right?
Nonetheless, confusion and enlightenment are interdependent. Truth and illusion are relative.
Correct. Confusion and enlightenment are interdependent. Let's say, do you know who Smokey the Bear is?
Yeah.
Only you can prevent forest fires?
Yeah.
All right. So if you know that Smokey the Bear is not really, bears don't really wear vests and fire ranger hats, right?
Yeah.
So that's knowledge. You know that's.
Yeah.
But that's knowledge but is that knowledge? Really? Is knowing that helping anything with anybody, anything or anybody with anything, ever? I mean, he's not even around anymore. But what I'm trying to point to, and it's not working very well, is that what we call knowledge, much of it is, first of all, wrong. Okay? But let's see, is that what so truth, I get what I'm referring to is the truth and illusion are relative. Okay? So we knew that gravity was a force up until about 40 years ago. We knew that Pluto was a planet. Is that really knowledge, knowing that Pluto is a planet, or is that just illusion?
It's illusion.
Right. But it was truth. I don't want to belabor this. It's more like poetry. If you take it apart too much, you ruin it. So, but let's keep moving because I'm worried about my band.
This is the last line. If you seek this is the last line for now. If
of
you
the
seek
first half. Well, let's see how the clock does. Okay, go ahead.
If you seek reality trying to get rid of illusion, that is like wearing out your body to get rid of your shadow. If you realize how illusion is truth, That is like staying in the shade so your shadow
Yeah,
disappears.
like, I mean, good God, staying in the shade so your shadow disappears. That's so brilliant. But let's take it one at a time. I mean, not even brilliant. It's so artistic and creative and penetrating and perfect. So if you seek reality, try to get rid of illusion. That's like wearing out your body to get rid of your shadow. All right, so that's the first part. So wearing out your body to get rid of your shadow, that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
No,
It's a matter of fact, it sounds ridiculous.
it's not going to work at all.
And he's comparing it to, if you seek reality trying to get rid of illusion, that's like getting out of your body to get, wearing out your body to get rid of your shadow. He's saying that it's all illusion, right? All our knowledge is illusory knowledge. Everything that we think to be real is not, it's illusory. It's not, this is Maya. This is not the real thing. So if we try and get rid of this, if that's how you're going to get, if you're going to wake up by getting rid of illusion, there's not going to be anything left. There won't be even a skeleton left, right? You see that?
Yeah,
It's magnificent, but it
yeah,
gets,
it's
but then he
very
gets
on
even,
point.
but then he gets even better. I mean, to top it off, what's the second half of that line?
If you realize how illusion is truth, that is like staying in the shade so your shadow disappears.
Think about that. If you stay in the shade, you don't have to worry about your shadow. If you stay in the shade, there's no shadow. There's no shadow. But if you realize that Smokey the Bear is, or the flowers in the trees, they're true, but they're illusory, then you don't have to worry about your shadow. You don't see. This is the genius of these guys. How else could you put this? How could you put this better or more poetically or beautiful, right? And so then later there'll be koans talking about shadows and shade. And if you don't understand this reference or this creative construction, you're not going to understand anything. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you realize how illusion is truth, that is like staying in the shadows, in the shade, so your shadow disappears. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Because our human minds are only capable of illusion. Now that's scary for many folks, and Zen and truth is scary for many folks. So maybe we should stop there. But we've only gone. It's only last night at 4 a.m. I cut this up into 35 pieces because I thought it'd be easier to discuss or whatever, and I knew it would because it's just so beautiful. I want to keep going, but that doesn't make sense. So let's pick this up some other time, okay?
Okay.
And meanwhile, any questions we could also do on X or YouTube. Sometimes things are just so beautiful that you can't go to sleep again. They're just so beautiful, and this fed in that category for me. So trying to get it waking up by getting rid of illusion is like wearing out your body to get rid of your shadow. And then realizing the truth is illusory is like staying in the shade. You don't have to worry about any shadow. And it's just like, I mean, but I didn't put it as well as he did, obviously. And so forgive my excitement, but when true beauty, that gets me going. And to find it in the 10th or 11th century in China, and it's speaking to us through the ages, thanks to Thomas Clary. And for those of you, I don't expect there's many of you, but those of you who are inclined towards this is a passage from this wonderful book. Other people like enlightenment stories. So there's Transmission of Light, which is a similar book, which is Zen and the Art of Enlightenment by Zen Master Kaizan. He collected a bunch of enlightenment stories. Some of them are really interesting. Others, not so much. And then this one is available on Audible. We got to get more of these books on Audible so people get exposed to them. And so anybody can help figure out how to do that, that would be great, because there's a number of these priceless books that we just don't have. Some of them we do. And this is another one. This one comes from the Sufis, by the way. Oh, by the way, final thought. I put on X that Meister Eckhart had no contact with Zen. But I believe that he certainly had contact with the Sufis. And the Sufis had contact with Buddhism in China, and in China in particular. You know, Muhammad said seek knowledge as far away as China, and they did. Plus there was a Silk Route. So even though Meister Eckhart may not have had exposure to Zen per se, because of language barriers and cultural barriers and all kinds of other things, he most certainly did have exposure to some very prominent Sufis. And just to be as complete as possible. All right. Any other questions? This is fun.
Yeah, I do have a couple. First of all, Don Miguel Ruiz's book, Four Agreements. One of the agreements says, "Be impeccable with your word."
Right.
And many of the Zen koans that I've read, or Zen teachings that I've read, have a similar sort of. It's not phrased that way, but they say that at all times. I don't want to butcher it, but
I think
it's
they say
something like at all times.
Be impeccable. Period. As do the Sufis.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so like Foyan, for example.
Go ahead.
Foyan, for example, in instant Zen says that if somebody asks you a question, how do you answer? And if you stop and cogitate, think about it, then like, what kind of a real answer is that?
That's true.
And he says, if you get asked and you answer, how do you answer? If you get woken up in the middle of the night and asked a question, how do you answer? And he describes a couple of scenarios, and then he's like, how do you answer?
That's interesting. Where is that? Do you happen to know where that is?
Oh, I would. Okay. Yeah, this one, because they speak incredibly clearly, and each thing they say.
Because they're not speaking from their minds, they're speaking completely extemporaneously, completely spontaneously. And and this is true in life in general, if you can figure things out to where you're speaking from source, when you're speaking from spirit, from the heart, mind, body, soul, its actual essence, then you invariably do better. Right, but again, these are not tools for beginners. I mean, you're playing with the master's knives. You can cut yourself very badly. So you got to know what you're doing. But that's the whole art in Zen. That's how they would test people. That's how they would test teachers, and how they would test students, especially teachers, by the way. While you're looking, I'm going to read just a paragraph that comes up, and it's interesting. I mean, I like it. You people have not attained the experience, so you miss quite a good few things in the course of a day. That is why I say the original Zen masters are true friends. The path of the original Zen masters is like the bright sun in the blue sky. Why are there people losing the way? So, Zen is not very popular these days. Okay, good. What page?
There's one.
You broke up. What page?
The same copy.
You're breaking up.
Speaking effectively. Can you hear me?
Yes. What page is it?
42.
Okay. You broke up. Speaking effectively. If someone should question you, how would you speak? Can you speak effectively? If you can only speak after thinking and concentrating, what use is your statement? At midnight, how do you speak? Getting up at dawn, how do you speak? In the hallway, in the washroom, how do you speak? Can you speak effectively? Your eyes must be clear before you can. So they're warning also. So what's the question?
my question is, does a sage, a realized master, every single word they speak 24/7, no matter what, they're speaking from, they're speaking deliberately
Much more
from the
important than
source?
that, much more important than that, is that what they're doing here is they're saying, are you practicing 24/7? Are you living your, are you walking your talk? Are you actually a real Dharma student? Or are you dedicated, right? That's one. And two, these are folks in a Zen monastery or in a Zen zendo or in a some kind of what century was, what is this, 13th century Japan?
It's That's 12th century,
12th century Japan, right?
and he's a Chinese Zen master. So
So that'd be Chan.
one of the greatest.
Go
He's
ahead.
Song's dynasty.
Oh, okay. So it's the same group as the other guys from yeah. So he's speaking to Zen students. Speaking to serious students. Now, to answer your question, it all depends on what they're doing. I mean, if they're the CEO of an organization, they may have to play, a little politics sometimes. They're fluid. They're not rigid. They do what's indicated, hopefully, right? But what's more important for someone learning is this 24/7 mentality. To the extent that you can do it, you can do it too. Once you saturate yourself to the marrow, to the bones, that's how people wake up. By the way, and then they prepared, and then boom, somebody smacks them on the head, or something happens, and things don't go the way they hoped, or they get depressed or humiliated, or their ego takes a sudden blow, it knocks it off its tripod or whatever, and boom, they wake up. That's one of the mechanisms. And that's why in these books there's lots of stories of students waking up when the teacher hits them in just the right way at just the right time, with all kinds of things like enter the stream from over there or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Tie your shoelaces, kid. You're going to fall over on your face. He wakes up because of the preparation. Okay, sir?
Okay.
My battery seems to have lasted, so sayonara. Take care.
So yeah.
All right, bye.